So what we outlined earlier was in the context of Kaggle, where we had the need to go and submit our results. Let's assume that you are done with the modeling and you've built an A-grade model, and you are wanting to publish this as a web service for consumption across devices or web apps or whatnot. So that's exactly what we are going to do now. Yeah, we know that the model is not that great, but this step illustrates how you would go ahead and publish a model as a web service. Now, the simple thing that we are going to click here is something called setup as web service, and we'll follow the steps in the wizard. Okay, and what you can see here is there are two new components added to your experiment, which is the web service input and the web service output. So in a real-time scenario, your data is not going to come from a CSV file. The data is going to come from an external source, which is going to call your web service, and then your service is going to be invoked, and a certain set of processing steps is run. The model is applied, and the results are returned back to the web service. So let's go ahead to the next step of deploying the web service. We've set up the web service, now we need to deploy the web service. I'm just going to click on deploy the web service. So as you can see here, it, it says the experiment must be run so that your edits can be validated. So let's go ahead and run the experiment. So as you can see, once the input is provided, it is going to go through a set of pre-processing steps, which is the clean missing data, and then convert indicator values. And then we are going to apply the train model on the incoming data. And then once it does that, we are going to retrieve the result and pass it as an output. So let's deploy this as a web service now. Now, since it's a free account, we cannot deploy it as a public web service. We have the liberty to publish it as a private web service. Now, the private web service helps you to kind of check the instance correct. It gives you a view of how you would instantiate a web service and run it for testing. A small correction from the earlier step. In the earlier step, we had prescribed that the web service input should go into the select columns in the dataset. Now, when we are giving the data point as a web service input, we are expecting the data to be perfect. So we are not expecting the data to have any missing values or any transformations that needs to be done. So what we are going to do is we are going to pass in the web service input directly to the score model. So we're going to skip all the pre-processing steps that has been outlined. And please do remember that these pre-processing steps are essential in the context of Kaggle. As in the context of Kaggle, we are not publishing it as a web service. Rather, we are generating a result set, which is passenger ID and survived, and then submitting that result to the Kaggle environment for validation. So in a real-time scenario, what we are doing is we are going to connect the web service input directly to the score model, and then we are going to apply the trained model on top of that data point. And what you're going to get is the output of that particular data point. Now you could either choose to get all the data points, or you could choose to get some of those data points. So probably let's make a small change here again. So let's connect the score model directly to the web service output. Now, in the context of Kaggle, we need a result set file which has got only the passenger ID and survived, whereas in the context of an actual web service, we would probably prefer to have all the fields coming in. So let's rerun this experiment so that we can deploy it as web service. a couple of seconds, and then it should run and give you an OK. And then let's deploy this as a web service now. And, and let's test the web service in real time. So as you can see, the web service is deployed. And if you can see here, there's something called a test preview. Click on the test button here, and it should take you to another page where it is going to give you a set of options. Now let's click on test endpoint. That's exactly what we are looking to do. And we will enable sample data. So we don't really put in the sample data, but let's enable the sample data. Okay, and there you go. It goes and starts putting in some numbers, some data points. So we have a passenger 892 who is traveled by P class 3, whose gender is male, whose age is 34.5, and who embarked from Queenstown. Now let's test that response here. As you can see, the score probability is 0.12, which means the passenger did not survive. So let's make a small alteration and let's check what if it holds good for female. Okay, and there's not much of reasoning around passenger ID. You could even leave the passenger ID as 0, as it doesn't have any implication on the performance of that particular model. Ideally, during the modeling process, you would weed out the passenger ID, but then we have just kept it for reference purposes. And let's rerun the web service again. And let's say, so in this case, as you can see, a passenger, a randomly picked passenger who is a female who has traveled by P class 3 has survived with a probability of 0.64. Now let's make certain alterations all over again. Let's assume that the passenger is traveling by P class 1, and let's rerun the code assuming that the passenger embarked from Southampton. Does it make any difference? Wow. And you can see right away that if the passenger is a female and traveled by P class 1, the score probability is around 0.90. So it means that even if you had a higher threshold of say 0.7, still this passenger would have survived. Now let's see whether that holds good for children. And let's say the age of the passenger is 8, and let's alter the passenger to be male, and let's check the web service again. So as you can see here, that a male passenger who is of age 8 has been marked survived. So these are the different patterns that the model has learned by going to the data. Right? And let's make one more alteration. Let's mark gender female instead of a male child. Let's see whether a female child, and let's increase the age to 10, and let's see what should be the response. And you see that the probability of survival is around 0.94. Now let's kind of play around with the P class 3 as a final set of input card, and let's assume that the passenger is traveling by P class 3 is a child and is of female gender. Let's check the data point and still survived. But let's check one more time where the passenger is a male who has traveled by P class 3 and age is 10, and let's check the response. So as you can see here, a male passenger who traveled by P class 3 and is a child has declared not to be survived. So this is exactly how you're going to consume your web service, either through a web app or through a web application or through a chat bot, depending on your scope of application.